It's Tuesday, December 19th, 2023. This is Ashton Ellett here with another installment of the Senate Staff Oral History Project, sponsored by the Richard B. Russell Library at the University of Georgia. I'm joined here today in the Bob Short Oral History Studio with Mr. Terry Mathews. A proud graduate of the University of Georgia, Mr. Mathews assisted the Secretary of the Georgia State Senate before joining the staff of Senator Sam Nunn. He would go on to serve for over 11 years as Senator Nunn's State Director and Senior Advisor. Following his time on Senator Nunn's staff, he co-founded Mathews and Maxwell, an Atlanta-based statewide governmental affairs and consulting firm. Since 2013, Mr. Mathews has also been a partner with Government Solutions, LLC. Mr. Mathews, Terry, thank you so much for taking the time out of your afternoon so close to the holidays to sit for this Senate Staff Oral History interview.
Well, thank you, Ashton. It's a pleasure to be here, and I've been looking forward to this opportunity.
Well, I hope it lives up to everything that you imagine.
I'm sure it will.
So let's start at the beginning. Tell me about your childhood and upbringing. You grew up like your colleague Scott Maxwell in Oglethorpe County.
I did. I grew up in rural Oglethorpe County, outside of the county seat, Lexington, and kind of the joke is my partner Scott grew up in Crawford, where we have the only red light, and I'm the country boy that grew up out in the county. It was a very, very rural county, but it was a county where young people growing up and coming along were nurtured and had mentors, and I was very fortunate to have experienced all of that, and at a really early age, had some opportunities to do some things that kind of piqued my interest that I've carried forth to now.
What did your parents do for a living? What did your father do?
Yeah, my dad was a forest ranger for the Georgia Forestry Commission and retired after 34 years. We also lived out in the country, as I said, on some acreage, and while we had big gardens and some cattle and hogs and so forth. We didn't make a living from farming, but I had the experience of kind of having my hands in it and knowing a little bit about what it is to have a hog killing and what it is to raise your cattle and hunt and fish and things like that.
Let you speak with a little authority on those matters.
Exactly.
So tell me, your father working for the State Forestry Commission, once upon a time, those were political patronage jobs, and you had to be with the right crowd and everything like that. Was your family a political family, or did they stay sort of interested?
No, we really were not. We and I failed to mention my mother was a homemaker for years, and later on, after my younger brother and I were all grown, she became interested in driving a county school bus. And she loved it. She loved the kids, and she did that for quite a number of years. But no, our family really wasn't a political family. We were always friends with the local politicians, like the chairman of the local county board of commissioners, the commissioners, knew the state legislators and so forth, but really wasn't very actively involved. But to some degree, we were.
So what do you recall drawing your interest to politics and government?
I guess I really became interested in probably in a serious way in the 11th grade. A family friend by the name of George Bryant, who was a lawyer and an attorney in Danielsville, Georgia, not far from here. And he decided to run for Superior Court. And he decided to do so against a sitting incumbent. And of course, Ashton, as I'm sure you know, sitting incumbents, Superior Court judges rarely ever get beat.
Right.
And but George decided to challenge a sitting judge. And of course, he really wasn't expected to win, so he didn't have a lot of people working for him. So he brought me on board, of course, all as a volunteer basis. And looking back on it, over the years, I've thought, it was pretty shameful, some of the things we did. I mean, we accused the incumbent of all kinds of things. And I remember being an 11th grader at the local VFW standing in for George Bryan reading a statement that was probably slanderous. And lo and behold, George beat the incumbent. And it really lit a fire under me to continue to get involved in involved in campaigns, and from that campaign I went to another family friend, Charlie Yergin from Elberton, Georgia. He decided to challenge a sitting and longtime incumbent House of Representatives member, Georgia House member, and he too was really not expected to win because the incumbent was so entrenched. But the incumbent had kind of gotten to the point where he was taking his constituents for granted, his constituents for granted, and he had kind of evolved to the point that he thought a small number of so-called power people in each county could keep him in office. And we did an old-fashioned door-to-door grassroots campaign, and lo and behold, my friend Charlie Yergin defeated the incumbent House member.
You're like a four-leaf clover for these
I
lucky
was
rabbit's
just
foot.
really lucky. The first two campaigns as a youngster that I was involved in were successful, and it really did just kind of light a fire under me. I think one thing that I enjoy, and still do to some degree, enjoy the challenge of trying to change your mind to get you on my team, to get you on my side. I saw it as a challenge to undertake.
Well, and as we'll talk about, you made something of a career, and a successful one at that, and doing just that. So did you maintain that interest in politics when you came just down the road to the University of Georgia?
I did, but as you know, there are a lot of distractions at the University of Georgia.
Yes.
And so I put it on hold to some degree, but I still was involved as a volunteer in the gubernatorial campaign that pitted Bo Ginn against Joe Frank Harris. And Bo was the top vote getter, and Joe Frank came in second, and Joe Frank Harris went on, as you know from history, to win that race. So I did continue to be involved in campaigns from those early.
But you were a Bo Ginn volunteer.
No, I was a Joe Frank.
You were
Harris.
Joe Frank.
I was kind of swimming.
Do you and Scott fight about this?
A little bit. We tease each other a little bit, and of course, I was a very low level volunteer guy that wasn't playing on a high level, but yeah, a little bit, because I was swimming upstream because most everybody in the community were Bo Ginn people, but I happened to know Joe Frank Harris through some other mutual friends that never met Bo Ginn. Met Bo Ginn later after all this was said and done, and he was certainly a prince of a gentleman, and I think he too would have been an outstanding governor for Georgia.
Well, and perhaps more importantly, your record stayed unblemished in your
Well,
campaign.
that was the most important thing.
The most important.
Yeah.
So, what was your major when you were here at UGA?
I was a political science major, and of course, back then it was in the College of Arts and Sciences.
That's right.
And so I had a dual major, but I don't think it's officially in the transcripts. But I had hours for a major in political science and also in economics.
Okay, so we probably shared at least one professor with Chuck Bullock, who was here at the university at the time, and then Locke Johnson would have been a young professor.
I took just about every class that Locke Johnson taught, and he too helped spark that fire and keep it burning because of all of his lectures about the church, center to church, and all of that. And it's been a real pleasure for me to get to know Locke on a personal basis through my recent involvement in serving on the SPIA Board of Visitors. So I have a lot of respect for Locke and Chuck both.
Scholars and gentlemen.
Absolutely.
Both. So what, like most college students, graduation approaches, what were your grand plans for your life and career post-UGA?
Well, post-UGA, I had it in my mind I wanted to be an attorney, and actually begun Georgia State Law School, and soon decided that's not what I wanted to do. and had an interest in going back to UGA and pursuing a graduate degree in political science. And in the meantime, what I most wanted to do was to work for a elected official. And that's when I had an opportunity to come on board with Senator Nunn. And actually, you know, I do get asked from time to time, did I ever have an interest in running myself? And I actually attempted that one time. So after I graduated from UGA, a couple of years later, in Oglethorpe County, the probate judge there had gotten a little bit slack and looked like an opportunity to knock off an incumbent. So I qualified as a 22, 23-year-old to run for probate judge of Oglethorpe County. I went through the qualifications, all of the Secretary of State material, all said the minimum age was 21, you know, same for tax commissioner and board of commissioners and so forth. I qualified and was campaigning and was running, and then one of the other opponents had dug up the research. Actually, a probate judge, unlike other county office holders, is required to be 25 years of age. So it was a crazy thing, and no one knew. So I obviously had to drop out of the race.
But still technically undefeated.
Technically undefeated.
Well, before we talk about your time with Senator Nunn, tell me about your work with Hamilton McWhorter Jr. and your work in the state Senate before we talk about the U.S. Senate.
Yeah, you know, growing up where I did, like I said, like in most small towns, there's a lot of mentors, and especially they see kids coming along, then there's a group of folks in the community that really encourage you and promote you. No one more so than Hamilton McWhorter Jr., who's a revered family from Oglethorpe County, and he gave me an opportunity to work for the Georgia Senate in the Secretary of the Senate's office. I mean, I was just pushing paper, collating bills. I mean, you know, but I was there.
Got to start somewhere.
I was there in the middle of it, and it was a great opportunity, great experience. And I remember it actually paid more money than I'd ever made in my life. I'm like, oh my God, you know. So besides the experience and opportunity to be around, you know, elected officials and be around Mr. McWhorter, even got paid for it.
Well,
and you know, you're kind of like a wallflower to some degree, but you have access to the chamber and the anterooms and all of that, so you get a real education.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is not that this isn't true today. I just think it's not to the same extent. The number of just very colorful figures, very sort of real characters of Georgia politics, that would have been sort of the waning days of those really that real colorful period of Georgia politics that you would have seen. Who do you remember? Who stands out in your mind as state senators or legislators that you can recall out on the floor and like you said, in the corridors and hallways?
Yeah, Ashton, one that I really recall is, and I got to know pretty well and got to know his son later, is Senator Culver Kidd.
I had a feeling.
From Milledgeville.
The Silver Fox.
The Silver Fox. Matter of fact, he had a blue sport coat that the inside lining was Crown Royal bottles, you know, the bag that the Crown Royal comes in. And he was quite a character, and have some stories on the Silver Fox.
Well, we should probably turn off the camera and talk about some of those stories.
Right.
Well, tell me how did you get hooked up with Senator Nunn's office, his operation?
Yeah, it's a couple of things. I mean, people usually think that we were big contributors or we were big family friends or it was a patronage type thing, but it really wasn't. Scott Maxwell, my current business partner, he was deputy press secretary, and already working on the senator's staff. And back just a moment ago, I mentioned the mentors in Oglethorpe County. Well, one of my mentors was Clifford Brooks, who owned the Chevrolet place, and his just so happened that his sister, Mary Smith, was best friends with Senator Nunn's mother, Elizabeth, and Dad, Big Sam Nunn, they called him. And she personally contacted Senator Nunn and said, this is one of our, of course she was stretching it a little bit. She said, this is one of our best and brightest, and he would be fantastic. She wrote a handwritten letter, and years later, one day, Senator Nunn brought me that letter and said, you need to keep this.
Oh.
And he himself brought it and gave it to me. It was handwritten, just went on how wonderful I was and how great it'd be.
Some of it was true.
And, there may have been two words in there true. And so, I'm a big believer in no one succeeds without help and support, and I certainly had that.
Well, what position on staff did you take first?
Well, I started off as a caseworker.
Okay.
In September 1985. Casework, constituency services, prior to that it was handled by staff people in Washington, and there was a move to move the staff to Georgia to be a little closer to the constituents, to be able to meet with constituents, and also to be closer to some of the agencies that you were dealing with on behalf of your constituents, because Atlanta is home to the regional offices of most of our federal agencies, and so I was doing agriculture casework, small business administration casework, Commerce Department, and several others. So I started off as a caseworker for about a year. And
you were based out of Atlanta?
I was based in Atlanta.
Do you remember who your first boss was?
I do. She was tough, but very fair and a very effective leader, Zeta Johnson.
So you're doing this casework, and what would an average day as a caseworker be like for you at the Atlanta office?
The average day you'd have 30 or 40 letters on your desk, Zetas on your back to make sure they don't get too old before they get a response back. You read the letters, try to figure out what's going on, and then contact the federal agency to try to get some relief. And that's pretty much what it entailed. And we were, oftentimes we were able to get some relief or get somewhat, relief to the constituents. So it was a job where you felt like you were contributing. And Senator Nunn, he's in Washington doing what he's doing is a defense expert, foreign policy expert. But if you don't continue to work back home and get reelected, all that goes away.
Right.
So everybody's got to keep role to play.
So when did you start moving up? We'll say moving up in the organization and the operation. What was your next job?
My next job. So I was a caseworker for about a year, and then the Perry. So Senator Nunn had 5 district offices around the state, and had what we called back then field representatives that traveled that region as eyes and ears for the senator.
Right.
So the Perry, in one, the hometown, one district office for middle Georgia, was in Perry, and that job became available, and I asked to be promoted, and moved to that position, and I was.
So a field rep, that would entail lots of driving, lots of the rubber chicken circuit, that sort of thing.
It's kind of if you like people, it's kind of the best job on staff, because you're the eyes and ears. You're going to all these meetings. You're meeting people. You're staying in touch with his core campaign folks that dating back to '72 when he first ran.
Especially in Perry. Yeah.
I mean, we love everybody, but some get a little more attention than others when they stuck their neck out in '72 when no one else did. And but you go into a lot of Chamber of Commerce banquets. You go into a lot of civic clubs. We used to run ads in the local paper saying Terry Mathews, Middle Georgia field rep, will be at the the Bibb County Courthouse so and so day, and you would sit there for 3 or 4 hours, and you'd have a lot of people come in, and I'm having trouble. With the Social Security Administration, having trouble with SBA or whatever the case.
So before you opened a case, you would be the first point, usually the first point of contact.
Point of contact, and along with that is Friday afternoon, each field rep had to produce a weekly report.
Sure.
And actually in Senator Nunn's case, he read it because we would get it back with questions and comments and his scriggly writing that very few people can read, and I happen to be one of them. And so, I mean,
if you wanted to keep a job, you better learn.
He took it seriously. I mean, sometime in some little small town, a new fire truck was a big deal. So, I might have in my report, Montezuma has gotten a new expensive fire truck, and they're all excited, and they want you to come see it. I mean,
It's funny you mentioned Montezuma. Just to tell you how small of a world it was, I was at the Tulsa, Oklahoma airport the other day buying a Coca-Cola, and the woman saw my UGA jacket, and she goes, "My family's from Georgia, but you won't know the name of the town. It's Montezuma, Georgia." It's like, I'm very familiar with Montezuma,
it's
Georgia.
a small world,
but
that's great.
So, you're doing this field work. How often, one job that field reps often did was when the member came home and went to that district, you would be sort of their companion, driver, body person. Did you do that task
Absolutely.
as well?
You know the job well.
I should have by this point.
You described it better than I can.
Well, tell me what it was like. Obviously, you knew Senator Nunn. You worked for Senator Nunn, but I assume your real interactions with him were on these field trips, for lack of a better word.
It's I really can't explain it, but sometimes you meet people, and sometimes you just develop this real chemistry with, and have this special relationship with, and I think that's the relationship that developed with. I developed with Senator Nunn. We just kind of clicked, and I think he grew to trust me. And I think that's the reason I stayed so long and kept getting promoted. And of course, he's the type of leadership person that you want to do a good job for, and you feel like you're doing an important job because you're part of the team. So.
Well, for people who haven't had the benefit of having years of very close, intimate interaction with the senator, how would you describe him personally, politically, as a boss running a political office or a political operation?
Yeah, Senator Nunn never asked anyone to do anything that he wouldn't do, but he was the taskmaster. I mean, he expected the best, and he was also not the kind of boss that if you do a good job today, at the end of the day, Ashton, you did great. I mean, that was just kind of the way we operated. So you didn't have a lot of, you hit a home run today.
Not a lot of positive reinforcement.
I mean, we expect you to hit a home run every day. That's kind of what the deal is. But he was. One of the things that people used to kid him about or joke about is, he doesn't have any charisma. I mean, he can't run for president. He doesn't have any charisma, and that's somewhat of a joke. I mean, he loves a good joke. He's very witty. He enjoys a good time, and he does have charisma. But he's kind of reserved around people that he's not very, very comfortable with. And he and I used to talk about that you have to be careful of, when you're in the position he's in, of how you lay yourself out there. But I could tell you a quick story.
Please do.
It says a little bit about his humor. I'd not been working for him that long, and we had a tour, we had a trip, and I forget, we were doing something in Atlanta, had been maybe down in Middle Georgia or something, and we were driving, and then we were supposed to end up that night in Dalton, Georgia, at the Holiday Inn.
Mm-hmm.
So and we got up there, and we didn't get up there until like 12 o'clock, 12:30. It was late. I don't know why we had this schedule. So I got out of the car and went in the Holiday Inn to get our rooms. Well, I'm in the car. I left him sitting in the car, keys in the car. He's sitting in the car. I turn around and look, and for some ungodly reason, he'd come into the lobby of the Holiday Inn, come into the hotel. And we get our room keys. We go back to the car. It's locked.
Oh no.
He had locked the car. Got out, locked the car. I'd left the keys in the car because he was in the car and had and he wasn't happy. So, and we had to do the Chamber of Commerce breakfast the next morning in Dalton, which they have a huge crowd. We're supposed to be there before 7:30,
Mm-hmm.
and he and his briefcase was locked up in the car too. So he needed to prepare his speech for the next day. So he said, "Well, I'm going to go to my room. You ever get in the car, bring my luggage and bring my briefcase." Well, I called this locksmith and explained the situation, and he said, "You telling me Sam Nunn is in Dalton tonight?" That was kind of the height of Senator Nunn's popularity and all this kind of stuff. Okay, he said, the only way I'll come and unlock the car is if I get to meet Sam Nunn. Okay, I made the deal. Make a long story short, he comes, he unlocks the car. I take Nunn his suitcase and his briefcase and whatever. He doesn't even look at me. He just looking mean. Well, next morning, I said, and I'm thinking to myself, well, I was looking for a job when I got this one. I guess I'd look for another one. And next morning, I knock on the door, and to get his suitcase and put it in the car, he opens the door, and he just throws the suitcase out the door. And then he looks at me, he says, "Do you have any rope?" And I didn't quite understand him. I said, "What?" I said, "I'm sorry."
What?
Senator Nunn, rope. I said, "Do you have any rope?" And I said, "No, sir, I don't think I have any rope." He said, "Well, you find some rope, because here's what I want you to do. You take my suitcase and my briefcase and you tie it to the top of my car. And that's the way we're going to travel." And he just started dying laughing. And that was kind of the beginning of a great relationship.
Well, nothing like a good night's sleep. Let bygones be bygones.
That's one of my favorite stories.
That's a good one. Well, tell me, what sort of interaction did you have with other sort of regional reps? Did you have interaction with Senator Mattingly's folks, or later on Senator Fowler's folks in the state? Would you pass work
We
back
did.
and forth, even though it was sort of Democrats, Republicans?
Yeah, we did. We had an excellent working relationship, and it was a lot different back then. It was a lot more civil. We kind of worked to the same goal. Matter of fact, Harris Blackwood, with Phil Rep for Senator Fowler, White's Fowler, was a good friend of mine, and sometimes he and I would actually ride together to some meetings and so forth, and we worked together very well.
A lot less lonely.
Yeah.
That way.
Yeah.
You said you were talking about getting promoted. After field rep, what's next? Is that state director or
Well,
or
in
how'd it go?
between that was the 1990 campaign.
Oh, yeah.
So again, back to some of our earlier conversation, I really enjoyed the political campaign process part of it, and so the 1990 campaign we kicked off in 1989. So I left the Senate staff and officially joined the campaign staff, and I forget what I was called, but anyway, I was director of operations or field operations, And I think within a 9 or 10 month period, I traveled and held campaign committee meetings in every county in Georgia, because, of course, as we remember, Senator Nunn was elected in 1972.
Right.
So, there were people that have passed away, things changed. So we wanted to kind of re-energize and bring in some new, younger people into the inner circle in each county. We had a kitchen cabinet type group, or in each county, that we could depend on to call upon to help us and tell us what's going on and so forth. So that was the reason for the holding campaign committee meetings in every county. So
1990, that's the very famous ticket of Nunn, Miller, Howard, on those blue signs with the white letters, Nunn, Miller, Howard. What interaction did you have with Governor Miller, then Lieutenant Governor Miller's campaign? Because these days there's a lot of integrated campaigns.
yeah.
Was there interaction with the Miller, Howard folks, the Democratic Party of Georgia, such that it was as an operation?
We didn't strategize with them, but we did some joint appearances and helped and supported, and we had a very good working relationship. And it just so happened that Senator Nunn actually did not have an opposition in 1990. So my friends all laugh at me, said, "Oh, I was so and so, Senator Nunn's 1990 campaign." Well, who was your opponent? Well, by the way, we ended up not having an opponent. A woman qualified against us, and she wrote her check to qualify. She wrote a check to qualify, and it bounced. And technically, the Secretary of State Max Cleland ruled that she had technically not qualified.
Right. I was sitting here. It's like, I know a lot about Georgia politics. For the life of me, I have no idea who ran against Sam Nunn in 1990. Well, I'm glad. There's a reason.
There was a reason. So see, you're
I was like, man, I can tell you, it was Johnny Isaacson ran against Zell Miller, Matt Towery ran against Pierre Howard, but boy, I sure don't know.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you mentioned that.
But yeah, we had a great relationship and did, like I said, did appearances and that kind of thing for the other guys.
Well, one campaign that never was 1988. Our friend Roland McElroy has written a book called "The Best President the Nation Never Had."
Right, I have that book.
A lot of its focus, a lot of it is a memoir of what we're talking about here, working for Senator Nunn. But a big portion of it is the conversations and surrounding the 1988 presidential campaign that never came to pass. What was, obviously you were in Georgia, you weren't up in Washington when these conversations were going on, but what were you hearing from people on staff, whether your boss was going to run for president or not?
Well, actually, he was here. The senator was here a lot, and I was with him. So
Okay.
I was privy and close to all those conversations and so forth. I mean, bottom line, the conversations we used to have, I think I think he just never had the fire in the belly to go to Iowa and New Hampshire and do the things you have to do. Right. And of course, also he had the opportunity on several occasions to be vice president, and I think he came down on the side that I have more power authorizing the Defense Department than I would be as vice president. But we were continuing to do Georgia appearances, and we had this string. It was just comical to see, during the height of that frenzy about whether he was going to run or not, and later on whether he was going to be vice president or not. I mean, we had media from Australia. I mean, we were doing things, in small town Georgia, and it's a motorcade everywhere we go. And we get down to South Georgia, and the gnats are out, right?
Oh yeah.
And to see those people try to fight the gnats, but I mean, it was all the big media from not only the U.S. but around the world. It was quite a spectacle.
So, what you said earlier about how Senator Nunn, very thoughtful, very reserved. So it's your opinion that he was not that kind of political figure, leader, to do the things that a modern president has to do.
I'm sure you know, Ashton, I know you're familiar with the Democratic Leadership Council.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And, of course, you know the DLC was a centrist group.
Yep.
And Senator Nunn was a founding member of that, along with Bill Clinton, Al Gore, I think Chuck Robb, right? You probably know the list. So many years has passed. That group, wanted one of their own to run against President Bush. I guess that was '92, right?
Well, I think Bill Clinton technically ran in 1988.
But the '92.
'92 was definitely.
And so Senator Nunn and I used to. We're together all the time, right? So we talk all the time about it. And it's like, well, you'd have to be crazy because President Bush has got ratings out the roof, unprecedented approval ratings and so forth. Who in their right mind? So Senator Nunn kept dragging his feet, and because I think he's more analytical.
Sure.
As you know, he went to Georgia Tech undergraduate.
Which we don't hold against him at all.
We let no one's perfect. So. I think he's more analytical, more of that mindset, and that's when Bill Clinton stepped up and said, "Well, I'll do it." I guess the rest is history.
Well, when I think of the 1992 campaign, I think of that Saturday Night Live skit when it's all the Democratic candidates who might be running, and it's Mario Cuomo, who very famously didn't get on the plane to go and qualify, and I think he's played by John Lovitz. And the camera just looks at him, and he says, "I have mob ties." And it's just all the reasons not to run in 1992.
Right.
So, you stay on. Tell me about being state director. So that comes after the 1990 campaign. And obviously you had experience, working with Zeta Johnson and others in that role. What does a state director have to do, and what sort of skills do you have to bring to that position?
Yeah, and I had, as you stated, I had been field rep in Perry, and also prior to moving over to the campaign, I served for a while as field rep of North Georgia. Mm-hmm. So in Georgia, we had a state office in Atlanta with, I guess, all of our caseworkers at that point, and we had 5 district offices in around the state, in Columbus, Perry, Savannah, Gainesville, and Rome. And I think, my background of having been a field rep and my background of the campaign, I think really made me, in a unique position to know, and having been a caseworker, because that's the core of what of what the state office does, is supervising the field reps, supervising the caseworkers, and also as state director, also I was involved in providing information about Georgia legislators, Georgia elected officials. It's really paved the way for me to be able to do what I'm doing now. Right. It's because on behalf of Senator Nunn, I dealt with state House and Senate members, constitutional officers, senior staff of the governor, and so those are some of the responsibilities.
So, did you hire the caseworkers and field staff, or were those pitched to you from on high?
No, there was the administrative assistant in Washington, we call it, Charlie Harmon, Bob Hurt, and so forth. But they gave me a lot of leeway. I think I had probably more leeway than most people would, given, for whatever reason we talked about earlier, Senator Nunn and I developed a great trusting relationship. So, no, I was able to put the team together and so forth.
When did you learn that Senator Nunn was contemplating not running for re-election in 1996?
well before he made the announcement, we had some conversations because, again, we spent a lot of time together, probably
Right.
from 1990 to 1996. I mean, I don't think any staff person spent more time with him than I did. Matter of fact, Colleen, his wife, used to laugh, you spend more time with him than I do.
Right.
So, being together that much, you have private conversations.
Sure.
And he had gotten elected, I guess, when he was 34. And he had been able to serve for a long time as chairman of the Armed Services Committee and had been able to do most of what he had wanted to do, I think. And we used to talk, it's a 6-year term. So,
Right.
The conversation used to go along the kind of like, well, if I'm going to do something else, maybe now's the time for me to get out, where I'll have time for another career. We had people that would tell us, I might understand you not want to do 6 years, but you can easily get reelected, serve 4 and step down. That is something ethically he would never ever consider, and he said so. And it was, if he ran again, it'd be a 6-year commitment. To give you an exact date, I guess it'd be hard to do that, but we used to talk about it.
Now,
And as it got closer toward the time, the kind of inner circle, the kitchen cabinet, we used to meet and talk about the pros and cons of running and not running.
who would those figures have been? Those individuals been in that sort of informal
Usually,
core group?
of course, when I was involved, we were in Atlanta. Norman Underwood, Gordon Giffen, Charlie Harmon, I guess. I'd have to really think. It wasn't a huge group. I mean, it was a pretty small group. And what Senator Nunn wanted to do is he wanted to make the decision, but he wanted it to get media coverage. And so he did want it. So obviously, if it leaked out before the big speech, it would dampen the coverage. So his speechwriter in D.C. was literally working on a re-election speech. He and I were down here crafting and working on a retirement speech.
Now, you were state director, and obviously you spent the vast majority of your time in Atlanta and around the state.
Correct.
Did you go to Washington?
Occasionally.
Just occasionally?
Yeah.
Now, was that like walking into an alien land?
Well, I was there enough, not so much, but the D.C. folks, they think, oh, nobody matters but the D.C. people. We think, well, if we don't do our job down here, you won't have a job, so.
A friendly competition.
Yeah.
So unlike some of your colleagues, you never came down with Potomac fever.
No.
Not on your
And sometimes maybe I think I should have, but.
Yeah,
But I
it seemed to have
kind of
worked
had my pathway.
Well, why do you think, and we've touched on this briefly, but apart from 1972, that the Democratic primary and runoff against Senator Gambrell, Ernie Vandiver, and others, and then the general election against Fletcher Thompson, that back in the 72, that was really the only serious campaigns Senator Nunn ever had to run. Why do you think that is? Whereas some of his colleagues, Senator Nunn, Mattingly, Fowler, all faced stiff competition, all lost re-election during Senator Nunn's time in office.
Yeah, I mean that's a very good question. I don't know if I can answer that, but I think he projects leadership. His ethics is real. He works at it and works at it very hard. Nothing was left to chance. I mean, reading field rep reports. I mean, and I dare say anybody else has ever done that. All the little details. I just think it all came together for the total package. And, his great uncle was Carl Vinson, who was there so long. We had such a legacy. Senator Russell of defense expert in defense and foreign policy. I mean, I almost think that the constituents, the citizens, were looking for that next person to fill those shoes, and he became that person more so than anybody else. But that's a tough question, Ashton.
Yeah, that's why they pay me the big bucks to ask the hard questions. But this one's a little easier, which is, of all the years that you were on Senator Nunn's staff, so almost over 11 years, almost a dozen years, what do you recall as your favorite moment, your proudest moment that you really take away from your time working on a Senate staff?
Yeah, I think one thing that I'm very proud of, if you the flood of 1994, that was devastating to Middle and South Georgia. I think we did very good staff work. We deployed all of our field reps to the region, even sent some caseworkers down there, set up, had field reps manning booths, in different places and traveling around, making sure that local people were getting what they needed from the federal government. I remember, flying around with Senator Nunn and Gary McConnell, who was Governor Miller's director of the Georgia Emergency Management Agency. McConnell too was a real leader. He was a leader of men, and the two of them made sure. I remember being at the Macon Airport, and I guess it's back before everybody had a cell phone. Senator Nunn, he got Al Gore on the phone, got Clinton on the phone. There was a problem with some of the reserves, Army Reserve. I can't remember all the details. Some of the Army Reserve personnel not being able to deploy, and they were right there in Macon because all the National Guard had not been exhausted. I mean, you call the president, the vice president, the secretary of defense, and that gets cleared up real quick. And so I think that's one thing among others like that. But I think that's an example of how it should really work.
Well, something I should have asked earlier, in talking about national defense and the military, the Armed Services Committee reminded me about, you would have served in that period where it was going from the Cold War to the end of the Cold War, the so-called peace dividend, and part of that were conversations about base closures, realignment. I think BRAC, is the acronym for that, which causes, especially in a state like Georgia, where you have so many military bases and things of that nature, can cause a lot of stress and consternation in local communities. How did you experience that as state director, and what did you hear from your field reps?
Yeah, that's another example, I think, of great work that should also be noted. We did have the BRAC Commission. I think at that time we had 13 military installations in Georgia. One of Robbins Air Force Base is being seriously looked at because the mission down there is similar to the mission in Dayton, Ohio. Do you consolidate them? Moody was on the chopping block a couple of times. Each community that had a military base, they set up a support group, and we helped the interface of that support group. Provide all the staff, resources, and we were very hands-on and engaged. And it too was somewhat similar to the response of the '94 flood. Well, and I think that's one thing too. It's what Senator Nunn and Arnold was staff director of the Armed Services Committee, and I think you've spoken to him. I mean, they worked all the time to make sure the missions at our bases remain cutting edge, and it was an ongoing effort to support the bases.
So not just a reactive response, but proactive in that if you put the things here, the programs here, the equipment here that are forward-looking, you won't be a target for closure and realignment.
You may still be a target, but it's a lot easier to fight
That's
them
right.
off.
That's right. Well, how did you come to terms with understanding that your time with Senator Nunn was winding down, and taking those next steps in your own career?
Yeah, and like I said, from '90 to '96, we had field reps that did the staffing, but I too accompanied him on most all the engagements. And I really enjoyed my job, and I was sorry to see it come to a close. I did think it was probably the best decision for him. He had given his contribution, and it was more than adequate. When time did expire, I had the relationships to fall back on, and Gary McConnell was one, the GEMA director. He hired us to help him with some projects. I had people like Gary and others said, you have the contacts. You will be able to be successful if you pursue state government affairs business. And Scott and I kind of met up by happenstance. And Scott said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I'm going to start a lobbying business." He said, "Well, I'd be interested in working with you, joining forces," and we did.
So what kind of work has your firm specialized in? When we say full service and government affairs in Georgia, what does that mean?
Well, I think it means if it's on the up and up, you have any money? No, I'm just joking about that. I think what we refer to as full service is, it used to be years ago. There was lobbyists that worked the Capitol during the session, and then they didn't have much engagement with state agencies. And now it's just as important with the regulatory process as it is with not maybe quite as important, but the regulatory process is as much a part of it as anything else, as being at the Capitol during the legislative session. And we not as much anymore, but with Scott's press background, we have helped and engaged with clients for media training and such and so forth.
Well, it sounds like your work with Senator Nunn's office and writing all these reports and distilling and condensing all this information and sending that up to Washington for Senator Nunn to read is not a whole lot different than what you do by sending those same reports to your clients.
That's very true. That is a very accurate statement.
So let that be a lesson to any student watching this. Learn how to read, learn how to analyze, and learn how to write, and you might have a job.
I think in our job as lobbyists, dealing with legislators and dealing with clients, it's very important to be able to express yourself. Now, dealing with legislators, they're not going to read more than one page or even that. So you need to have the ability to be concise and understand what they will absorb and what they will not.
In education, we call that differentiation. Well, there's one thing I did want to talk about, and that's sort of evolving political landscape in Georgia. You worked for Senator Nunn at a time when Georgia Democrats were in full power. You and Scott start your firm mid-'90s as the Republican Party's growing and not quite the majority, and you get some redrawn district lines, and Democrats are still in power. And then 2002 comes. Sonny Perdue beats Roy Barnes in a shocking upset. The state Senate goes. 2 years later, the state House goes Republican. How does a lobbying firm, adjust to changing political reality in a state where you had one power control for so long, and that's now changed.
I think for us, there were two things that we were fortunate in both. I think number one, Senator Nunn had such a tremendous reputation that he was well regarded and respected by people of both parties. And even in back when this change occurred, again, I think it was more civil, and there was a tremendous amount of respect. So, I mean, that to be known as former senior people for Senator Nunn, I mean, that carried some weight.
Right.
And the other is, and there's a few still there, many of the folks that became leadership in the new Republican, in the new majority, Republican majority, they had been Democrats that I had known and dealt with when I worked for Senator Nunn.
Governor Perdue and
exactly.
Jack Reed. Yeah.
I mean, I first met Governor Perdue before he was ever even a state senator when I lived in Perry.
Right.
So Jack Hill, now who passed away a couple of years ago, longtime chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee. It was a huge number of them that switched parties. My friend Butch Parrish from Swainsboro. He's Terry Coleman, just out of office now, but of course he never switched parties. But there was a large, quite a contingency of them that in all those negotiations switched parties.
Well, right, yeah.
Alan Powell from Hartwell.
Alan Powell, Richard Royal.
Royal.
Eventually switched parties, Ways and Means chair.
Gerald Green, Bob Hanner. Mickey, of course, he's passed away, but it was a great friend and great legislator, and Mickey Chinell. Matter of fact, his daughter worked for us in Senator Nunn's office. Just a great family, great people.
Well, you mentioned Terry Coleman. He had that speaker, showdown in the Democratic caucus with Larry Walker.
Larry Walker's
from
another
Perry.
one. Yeah. Who took me under his wing when I moved to Perry for a year or two.
Great friend of the Russell Library for sure.
Yeah.
Well, what would you tell young people? We live in a cynical age, perhaps more cynical now than even in the past. But what would you tell young people, or even people looking for a change of career, and thinking about working in government service like you did in the 80s and 90s?
It continues to be, in my opinion, an honorable profession. We need good people more than ever, and there are good people in public service, government service. We need more, and don't give up on it.
Well, beyond all this work that you do that keeps you on the road and keeps you working, what else are you involved in? You mentioned you're a member of the SPIA Board of Visitors. What other sort of activities draw your interest and you put your time and your treasures into?
Well, I just recently rotated off the board of the Tommy Nobis Center, but it's a great organization. I've been on the board about 8 or 10 years that trains people with developmental disabilities, and it's a great center, a great program that was actually founded 40-something years ago or 50 years ago by a family friend who was a special education teacher. So that's been very rewarding. I remain on the SPIA board and enjoy the relationship. I never thought when I was over here at UGA that I would be back. When I was here, when I got called to the dean's office, it was never good. So it's been a great experience to be involved. Those are some of the things. My wife, Margaret, she's even more than I am, a great UGA football fan. So we're involved with tailgating and going to games and things like that.
Well, with the exception of the last SEC championship game, it's been a good time to be a Georgia Bulldog fan.
It has been.
And I think it will continue to be so for
I think
years
so
to come.
too.
You know, here's hoping anyway. Well, anything, you know, just as we wrap up and come up on the 1 hour mark, what else would you like to record for posterity?
Well, I think you've done an excellent job of asking questions to get me to provoke my thoughts. So I guess I can't any parting comments, but it's been a real pleasure. You know, I look back on all those years with Senators Nunn with fond memories. I guess one thing that I would say that I failed to say thus far is one of the qualities that I admire so in him is his loyalty. He's a very loyal person. I mean, people that supported him in '72 when it was rough. I mean, I used to laugh. He could see someone, you know, 200 feet away walking away from him, and he'd say, "Isn't that so and so? You know, he helped me in '72." I mean, literally. Mm-hmm. And he's also, so he never forgets. And I appreciate people like that. And he's also the kind of person, you know, he and I remain in touch, but you can just pick up where you leave off the conversation. You don't have to talk every day or every week or even every month. But he's a friend, and he's there when you need him.
Well, the mark of true friendship. Terry Mathews, thank you so much on behalf of everyone here at the Richard B. Russell Library. Thank you for your time and the benefit of your thoughts.
Thank you, Ashton. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, sir.